Well, hey everyone, my name is Ron, and I'm the pastor here at Vitalpoint Church. And I want you to know that we are a multi-site church that has a passion for small towns and for people who are exploring and growing their knowledge of Jesus and commitment to his church. I want to begin by asking a question. When you show up at a party or some sort of gathering and someone asks you, hey, who are you? How do you answer them? I want you to think about that for just a quick second. How do you answer someone when they say, who are you? Or tell me about who you are. Well, we might start off with our name. My name is, and you fill it in. You might say what you do for work. You might say, this is where I grew up. This is the school that I went to. You might even talk about your family, or if you've got kids, or if you've got grandkids, or maybe you'll tell them that you go to the CrossFit gym. I don't know. For many of us, our identity is defined by what we do and who we are. And even our accomplishments sometimes fit into that. And just for clarity purposes, participation ribbons don't count. See, here's the thing. Our summer series that we're starting today is called Discovering Jesus. We're going to look at 7 I am statements that Jesus made about himself that are recorded in the Gospel of John in the New Testament. What we're going to discover about each of these statements is that they fill in a picture of who Jesus is. Each statement is going to reveal a characteristic or a quality of God, but even more important, we're going to discover that these statements have direct connection to our lives. I know that there's a lot of confusion around Jesus. Like, what did he come to do? Who was he? Was he just some religious figurehead? What is the deal? In this series, what we're going to do is we're going to unpack these statements to give us a deeper sense of who he is. And I want you to hear me on this. I don't want us to just simply learn about Jesus. Like, I don't want you to learn about Jesus like you would learn about your favorite hockey player or sports figure or celebrity so that you can spit out facts about them. What I want you to do is I want you to be captured. I want you to be captured by his gaze. Because when you're captured by his gaze, you find true life. There's a verse in the Gospel of John that kind of helps us understand a little bit of the bigger picture of what we're trying to see happen in this series. John writes this in John chapter 20, verse 30 and 31. He says, "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book." That means he did a lot more than we could ever imagine. "But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." John says, "I wrote all these things so that you might believe in who he is, that he is the Son of God, and that he came and that we can have life in his name." It's easy to be intrigued by Jesus, isn't it? I mean, he's got some really great teachings. It's easy to be curious about his life. I mean, some of the things that he did were so incredible. But what happens is it's easy to become a fan of Jesus and totally miss the depth of who he is and how he wants to walk in relationship with him. And that as we believe, as we are captured by his gaze, the transformation of his likeness happens in our lives. I want to tell you a funny story that happened to me a number of years ago. I was pastoring at a different church. And this mom came up to me and she says, "Hey, Ron, can you come and talk to my child?" And I said, "Sure. What do you want me to talk about?" And she said, "The kid, every time they see you, they say, 'There goes Jesus.'" So I actually went over to the kid and I knelt down and I said, "Hi, my name is Jesus." Okay, I didn't do that. The mom wouldn't have liked me doing that. I actually introduced myself. But that stuck with me for a very long time, and it came back to my memory as I was writing this today. The closer we walk with Jesus, the more we're captured by his gaze, the more we love like him, the more we show kindness and patience and firm and bold truth with grace. See, here's the thing. As we navigate through this summer series, I want you to ask yourself each week, am I looking more like Jesus? Would a kid say, "There goes Jesus," as you walk by? No, you got to keep that to yourself. It'd be a little strange if you kept bragging about it, but you know what I'm talking about. Now, before I jump into our first conversation of the introduction to the bigger picture of the series, and before I give you the 7 I am statements, I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to ask you to make a commitment this summer to do whatever you can to be part of this series. Whether it's to intentionally be at one of our gatherings in one of our locations, or whether it's I'm going to commit to making sure that if I miss one, I'm going to watch it on YouTube or listen to it on podcast. And as you go through each week, what I want you to do is I want you to write some notes, because here's the thing. At the end of our series, our hope and our current plan is that we're going to open up space at the end of the series for reflection and commitment as we contemplate how these statements impact our lives. So let me give you the 7 statements. The I am 7 statements, and then I'll give an introduction to the entire series on why Jesus used the I am. So 7 statements. 1, I am the bread of life. 2, I am the light of the world. 3, I am the gate. 4, I am the good shepherd. 5, I'm the resurrection and the life. 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And number 7, I am the true vine. Now we have to ask, why did Jesus use these statements and start them with I am? See, Jesus was intentional with his words and his teaching, and especially true with these bold claims. These statements actually got Jesus in a lot of hot water with the Jewish leaders, these religious elite that were the gatekeepers of the Jewish faith and the system. The statements disrupt their idea of God, so much so that they were wanting to kill Jesus for these statements. Look at John chapter 8, where we see the description. Jesus is interacting with the religious elite, and he's talking back and forth about Abraham and all this kind of stuff. But then he says this in John 8, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. So they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. See, Jesus steps into this moment and starts it with truly, truly, which means this is not just true, it is real truth, real reality, and you better lean in, because I'm about to teach you something that is factual. I'm going to teach you something that cannot be disputed. This is not false information. This is not conspiracy. He says, before Abraham was, I am. This hit them like a sonic wave, hit them and knocks them backwards, so much so that they pick up stones and they're prepared to kill him in that moment. But Jesus hides himself and departs from that space. Why were they so upset? They were upset because Jesus is claiming to be God. If Jesus was at a party and they said, who are you? He would say, I am. If they said, what do you do for work? He would say, I am. Hey, do you got family? He would say, I am. See, we need to link this I am statement back into the Old Testament. This is what I love about the Bible with the Old Testament and the New Testament. We need the thread of the truth working together. See, we go all the way back to Moses. This is a connection point even for the Jewish leaders of the time that Jesus is speaking to. See, when God spoke to Moses in the burning bush and assigned him the task of delivering and leading God's people from slavery in Egypt to the promised land, Moses and God have this dialogue. There's this back and forth thing, and Moses reveals his insecurities of the moment. His insecurities are on display, and God kind of has to give him a bit of a pep talk in the convo. Let me read it for you in Exodus 3:13 through 15. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God says to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel: the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. God says to Moses, tell them that I am has sent me. Now, we need to dig into this and kind of dig in a little bit more here. And this is how I want to do it. Think about this question. What are humans bound by? Think about this. What are humans bound by? Time, right? We have a beginning and we have an end. Ecclesiastes talks about there's a time to be born and there's a time to die. The week that I'm recording this message and giving this talk, my good friend Randy Collins from Holly Gully has passed away. He passed away this week. When someone passes, we are gripped by the reality of our time being limited. God doesn't exist in time. God's not bound by time. Matter of fact, a day to God is like 1,000 years, the Bible tells us. So when God says, I am sent you, it's the name that points to the eternal existence, and that time is not a restrictor for God. God doesn't look at it as past, present, and future. God is a continued existence outside time and space. So when Moses says, what name will I give and speak about, they say, I am sent you. He's talking about the eternal reality of an everlasting God that has sent me, and you better listen. So when Moses goes and does this, it's like the ultimate flex of dropping a name. The I am has sent me. See, when we think about the name of God as the I am, we, like many of the people of old, must fall before God with holy reverence and fear in the name of God. Moses uses his name because God is eternal, with trembling with a holy fear in his presence because of his holiness. He is set apart from anything that we could ever imagine. That is, the sovereignty of God is set apart, that he doesn't answer to anybody because of the eternal aspect of who he is. So what we see in these two sections of the Bible is that Jesus is eternal. The truly, truly statement that he spoke to the religious leaders and the Moses conversation puts us together to realize that Jesus is actually God. No, more than just claiming to understand or knowing and understanding that he came to die on a cross, but that he stepped into humanity to become one of us, that he reveals who God is amongst us. But there's more. Like, it just gets even better, because there's a connecting point for us as we dive into the deeper part of understanding who Jesus is, and then ultimately getting to the place of deeper part of faith and the application of this. See, the entire scriptures support the fact that Jesus claims to be God. As a matter of fact, John, at the beginning of his letter, launches into his entire letter/book defining Jesus as this. Let me read it for you in John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. John, very cleverly, under the direction of the Spirit, takes us back to the beginning of Genesis. In the beginning. It's a masterful work of writing here, because it's connecting the reality of who Jesus is back to creation. And the Word referred to is speaking of Christ, of Jesus, because in verse 14, it says that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So the Word is the eternal Son of God, existing in eternal realm as the Son, but coexisting as one as God. It is the eternal aspect of who he is. So what we begin to realize about the great I am is that he's not just simply another religious figurehead trying to ignite some revolution of some new religion when he came. He was actually the eternal God showing up in the flesh, for us to be one of us. So when Jesus drops the I am statement, we're seeing and understand the qualities of God. That the cross, the payment for sin, becoming one of us, revealing the reality of the kingdom, but also revealing the heart of God. To know God is to know Jesus. To know Jesus is to know God. Actually, the writer of Hebrews, in Hebrews 1:3, the last part of 3, which would be 3b, says this: He, referring to Jesus, is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. It's not like he has qualities that look the same. No, he is God. Like, for example, people who meet my oldest son, he's on staff here at Vitalpoint Church, and he's on our teaching team. When he teaches or he's in leadership environments or stuff, people come to me and say, wow, your son, you can tell he is your son. We know that he's your son. The way he uses his hands, the way he talks, the way he laughs. He's so much like you. Yes, he is, but he's not me, and I'm not him. Jesus is God in the flesh. He doesn't just have qualities that look like God. He is God. He's the exact imprint of his nature, and he holds the universe with the word of his power. I want you to think about how defining that is, that in him and through him, creation is held together by the power of his word. The word became flesh, but the word is also the power of holding things together. See, we have to establish the why behind the statements, because if we are unclear on the I am, then we will only see these statements from a surface level perspective and not understand the deeper reality of the truths that Jesus makes when he says these statements, the 7 statements. We will miss the reality of them. But I wonder about all this, and I think, is there something more about this that we need to understand? Is there something a little deeper that we need to get a hold of here? Because remember, I talked about, it's not just a series about learning about Jesus and learning about who God is through the person of Jesus Christ. We recognize that these statements are going to have direct application to our lives. So for some of us, what we've just looked at for the last few minutes is maybe new to you. You had no idea. You put Jesus on the same level with all other religious figureheads, and you've just thought he's just lumped in with all them because all religions are the same. So he's just kind of he's just there. You've realized maybe today that he's more than just a religious figurehead. Or maybe you've grown up in church and you have had this image of Jesus. You see the cross at the front of the sanctuary and Jesus is on that cross. Or maybe you have that image of Jesus with the flowing hair and the olive skin and the blue eyes in the walls of the Sunday school that you went to. Or maybe today it's a deeper understanding of uncovering the truth of who he is, the confusion that you've had. And now you're getting clarity. Now, listen to me. I know talking about Jesus like this, the way I've done for the last few minutes, it might even add some more confusion as we try to connect the dots between he's the Son of God and he's God. And it's kind of like we know those emojis where your head blows off the top of your head. I mean, those are sometimes a reality, but we're beginning to get clarity. And for some of us, what we need right now is the paddles of Jesus put on our faith to bring us back to life. Because some of us have been treating Jesus like people we follow on social media. Sure, you like him, you press the like button. You might even occasionally push the heart button or a smiley face. You can talk about him. You can tell some of his stories. You're more of a fan than you are a true follower in the sense of growing in your walk with him. See, the reason why I say that is because I know that in my own life. I like Jesus. I really like his stories, his miracles. They're very exciting to read and to study. I mean, Jesus took a kid's lunch and put it into the biggest buffet ever and feeds thousands of people and there's leftovers. I mean, you can't get any more exciting to that. We can be intrigued by the stories, but we never give Jesus access to the deeper parts of who we are. We like to apply his principles and his teachings, but we only see them as behavior modifications. We never see them as a way to get deep within our souls to bring about the inner transformation of our inner world. To establish that Jesus is the great I am is to see Jesus as the one who, by his power, holds the universe together, has full access to our lives, and in doing so, we move beyond trying to deal with the symptoms of sin and deal with the root of sin. Let me explain it with dandelions. I know you're like, you didn't see that coming, did you? Dandelions. Sometimes I have dandelions on my lawn, and I got to tell you, my wife can tell you this, they drive me crazy, and the drive isn't very far to getting to crazy, let me tell you. So I sometimes will go out, and I'll start picking the dandelions, and I feel good about myself because I look back over the lawn, and they're gone. But then the next day, I wake up, and those things are back, and I'm like, what in the world? And then I realize this simple truth. I only dealt with the symptom, which was the yellow top. I never dug up the root of the dandelion. So many people only ever deal with the symptoms and never get to the root issue. It's why some would say, I tried Jesus and he didn't work. It's because you didn't give him access to the inner part of who you are. We've been quoting a lot this author by the name of Dr. Rob Reimer. He's written a number of books, and our team has been reading it and doing the hard work in our own lives of the inner access of Jesus. We've been reading this book called Soul Care, and it's been just a tremendous read for us as staff, and we've been very excited about it. Look at this quote. You cannot surrender a symptom and gain freedom from it. You have to get to the root. You cannot surrender a symptom and gain freedom. You have to get to the root. I mean, have you ever sat with somebody and they want help with something? Like you sit with them, you have a coffee, and they're struggling with something in your life, and you listen, you engage, you pray with them, you give them some pointers how they could overcome this particular thing in their lives. You've made a commitment to help them. You're going to hold them accountable. You're going to text me when you're struggling, and we do this. But then you notice over time, nothing's changing. And you drift apart. And then you get together a year later, 2 years later for coffee, and you're getting together and you realize that the same problem is still there. And the issue is we're trying to deal with the dandelion head, the yellow part, than we are willing to deal with the root. Many of us never get to the deep end of our walk with Jesus because we never allow him to shine the light in the darkness of our souls. And just so we're clear, the light shining in the darkness is not to fix. It is to reveal the reality of the root of the problem. And then Jesus can begin to do the work of the transformation. That's the reality of what we see in the person of Jesus Christ. I will never forget when Jesus revealed by his Spirit the symptom of anger and what the root was to it. See, I had this anger thing, and I've talked about it many times with many of you. You understand this. You've heard this before. But the root of that anger was my unwillingness to forgive my dad that he didn't want to see me when he left that Sunday afternoon to go to the hospital, and I never saw him again. I was 11 years old. He went to the hospital. He was sick. He was dying of cancer, and he didn't want us to see him the way he was. And the anger was the root. The root of the anger was my unwillingness to forgive that he didn't want to see me anymore. He didn't want me there. He didn't want me to be in that space with him. I began to find freedom from the anger as I dealt with the root issue. I think about this and I realize that for many of us, we were wounded at a young age. There's something deep inside of you that you've really struggled with. I've sat with people over the years and I've heard of the inner pain that many carry. And on the outside, you look amazing. Like, look to the person beside you and say, you look amazing. And the reality is that we do look good. We're great at putting filters on. We're good at making ourselves look okay. But the reality is the inner tension. Maybe it is some of you have lost a parent at a young age and have never processed that grief properly. Some of you maybe were sexually abused by a family member or a member of a church or physically abused as a parent that was always drunk and violent. You've experienced some sort of trauma as a child. And what has happened at that young age, and you're unaware that you even did it, was that you created walls in your life to protect yourself, to put up safeguards so that you would not be hurt again. And that's human nature. We do this without even understanding. But now the patterns that you have developed in your life, you look at them and say, that's just who I am. I am who I am. It's the Popeye syndrome. We don't even realize we're doing it. And when we fail to see these walls or the safeguards, what happens is they also keep Jesus out, and he doesn't have access to the places that he can restore. Don't surrender the symptom. Give access to the I am and allow him to reveal the roots. Where is the people-pleasing coming from? Where is the this idea of the anxiety, the shame, the self-harm, the anger, the negative chatter in your head? Where is this all coming from? What you can do is the great I am can access that part, reveal what it is by the light, and then he can begin the transformational process of bringing about something new. Now be warned, when we give him this kind of access, it means we have to do the hard work of unpacking the suitcases of our souls. It's a phrase that comes from Dr. Rob Reimer. We have to do the work of unpacking the suitcases of our souls. And for many of us, processing those things will take time, might even take years, as you enter into the space where Jesus reveals what it is, what the root is, and then you give him access and you just confess it and you own it, and then you walk with others in the journey of learning what it means to live in the life of his name, his identity in you. See, you can talk all you want about, I know that God loves me. I know that Jesus died for me, rose from the dead for me. You can know all that and miss out on the true life that is found in him. Here's where I want to end. One last quick thought. The reason why we give access to Jesus and the reason why we open up to him this way is because the great I am is more than able to bring about the newness and the freedom that we so long for in our lives. May we be a people who learn to give access to the great I am so that we don't have to use excuses for this is just who I am, and that his identity can be birthed in us and developed so that maybe someone who walks by you says, hey, there's Jesus.